Hello, how are you all doing here for our virtual online Leviticus Bible study? We're continuing on this week, and we are on chapter 11. And chapter 11 is kind of long as far as the actual chapter goes, but I think we could probably get done with it in one session. So I'm just going to dive right into it because there's lots to read, but I think we can actually get done with it in one session. So follow along with me if you'd like to. Leviticus chapter 11. I'm going to go ahead and read the whole thing. I'll pause periodically just to tell you which verse I'm on, and then we'll get through it, and then we'll talk about it. So, and the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, These are the living things that you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. Whatever parts the hoof and his cloven foot, and choose the cud among the animals you may eat. Nevertheless, among those that chew the cud or part the hoof, you shall not eat these. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the rock badger, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the hare, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the pig, because it parts the hoof and is cloven-footed, but does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. You shall not eat any of their flesh, you shall not touch their carcasses, they are unclean to you. These you may eat of all that are in the waters. Everything in the waters that has fins and scales, whether in the sea or in the rivers, you may eat. But anything in the seas or the rivers that does not have fins and scales, of the swarming creatures in the waters, and of the living creatures that are in the waters, is detestable to you. You shall regard them as detestable. You shall not eat any of their fish, and you shall detest their carcasses. Everything in the waters that has not fins and scales is detestable to you. And these you shall detest from among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are detestable. The eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon of any kind, every raven of any kind, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, the cormorant, the short-eared owl, the barn owl, the tawny owl, the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, and the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged insects that go on all fours are detestable to you. Yet among the winged insects that go on all fours, you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet, with which to hop on the ground. Of them you may eat the locust of any kind, the bald locust of any kind, the cricket of any kind, and the grasshopper of any kind. But all the other winged insects that have 4 feet are detestable to you. And by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening, and whoever carries any part of their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every animal that parts the hoof, but is not cloven-footed or does not chew its cud, is unclean to you. Everyone who touches them shall be unclean, and all that walk on their paws among the animals that go on all fours are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcasses shall be unclean until the evening, and he who carries the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the swarming things that swarm on the ground: the mole rat, the mouse, the great lizard of any kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all the swarm. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until the evening. And anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it is an article of wood, or a garment, or a skin, or a sack, any article that is used for any purpose. It must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the evening. Then it shall be clean. Verse 33. And if any of them falls into any of the earthenware vessels, all that is in it shall be unclean, and you shall break it. Any food in it that could be eaten, on which water comes, shall be unclean, and all drink that could be drunk from every such vessel shall be unclean. And everything on which any part of their carcass falls shall be unclean, whether oven or stone, it shall be broken pieces. They are unclean and shall remain unclean for you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern holding water shall be clean, but whoever touches a carcass in them shall be unclean. And if any part of their carcass falls upon any seed grain that is to be sown, it is clean, but if water is put on the seed, and any part of their carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. And if any animal which you may eat dies, whoever touches its carcass shall be unclean until the evening. And whoever eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. And whoever carries the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Verse 41. Every swarming thing that swarms on the ground is detestable. It shall not be eaten. Whatever goes on its belly, whatever goes on all fours, and whatever has many feet, any swarming thing that swarms on the ground you shall not eat, for they are detestable. You shall not make for yourselves detestable with any swarming thing that swarms, and you shall not defile yourselves with them, and become unclean through them. For I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourselves with any swarming thing that crawls on the ground. For I am the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall be therefore holy, for I am holy. This is the law about beasts and birds, of every living creature that moves through the water, every creature that swarms on the ground, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that may be eaten and the living creature that may not be eaten. This is the word of the Lord. 5 minutes of reading. Wow. All right, good job. So, like I said, a lot that we went through there. So just to break down everything that took place, right? It's pretty simple. Yahweh is speaking to Moses and to Aaron, right? Remember, Aaron is now consecrated as high priest, and he's actually had this direct revelation from Yahweh earlier. And so now he's almost on par with Moses here too. And it's also been given to Aaron as his task to proclaim, preach, and teach to the people. Remember, as we said last time, the priestly class, or the priestly office, as opposed to the pagans in the area, was not seen as a secretive class. They didn't do things and were privy to knowledge of things that the common people did not have or could not do. Excuse me. So this is the case here, right? Aaron is going to be told what is clean and what is unclean, just like Moses, and it's going to be Aaron's responsibility to teach the people these very things. All right. So basically what Yahweh does is he separates the clean from the unclean, the things that can be eaten from the things that cannot be eaten. He goes through a lot of the quadrupeds, right? So all the quadruped things that walk on four legs, if they have split hooves and they chew the cud, right? Then you may eat them. If they don't have split hooves, you may not eat them. If they don't chew the cud, you may not eat them. If they don't have either, you certainly may not eat them. All right. Then it goes to the things of the sea, and basically it's fins and scales. It has to have both. It has to have fins, it has to have scales. Right? So lobsters and crabs don't have either. Can't eat those. Eels can't eat those. Whales can't eat those, right? Then we've got the birds or the flying things, which includes bats and the flying insects. The only thing of all of those that's mentioned are the certain types of grasshoppers, right? Then the second part speaks about the carcasses of the unclean animals, and then the third part speaks about the carcasses of the clean animals. All right. So, why in the world does this take place? Why in the world do we have all of these laws and regulations? Well, if we jump to the end, and a lot of times you just need to jump to the end and you'll find out something important. And here's one of those cases. You need to jump to the end because Yahweh declares, I am the Lord your God, I am holy, and therefore you shall be holy as well. Which is, and I think we've talked about this before, maybe not in Leviticus, but in other Bible studies and other sermons, this is a proclamation that is at both the same time law and gospel. So, it's a declarative statement, I am the Lord your God, I am holy. You shall be holy too. So it's, you must be holy, and it's a, you will be holy. It's both and. It's at the same time. So we have this law of saying, hey, you can't go around defiling yourself. You can't go around doing whatever you want. You can't go around sinning. You can't go around making yourself unclean. You are my people. I am your God. You will be holy. But then it's also this promise because there's no possible way at all that can actually take place. We just can't be holy. We just can't be clean in and of ourselves. It's an impossibility. And so then we have this further promise that I'm Yahweh, you shall be clean. I will clean you. I will be the one who cleanses you. It's right there, the same thing. All right. And then verses 46, 46 and 47, that explains, okay, now we're going to figure out how you delineate between the things that are clean and unclean, the things that you can eat and not eat. That's the whole reason for this entire chapter, right? Now, it may actually have been obvious before even chapter 11 to the ancient Israelites that what they could and could not eat, right? And in fact, that their unity or their relationship with Yahweh actually demanded that they needed to avoid certain types of meat from certain types of animals in order to be clean and to purify themselves. It also was probably pretty well aware to them that if they touched the carcass of any animal, then they had to purify themselves as well. This was probably almost a self-evident thing, whereas we're sitting here and we've got no idea, right? The reasons are plain to them, or very well might be. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But to us, the rationale isn't that obvious. We can't really figure it out, right? What's so bad about the camel? All right, so the whole thing is why this meat and not others, right? Why do these animals, are they unclean, or maybe even detestable, right? We've got unclean, we've got detestable. Were they inherently unclean? Or were they unclean from a ritual source, right? Something outside of them. So the question at hand here is why did eating unclean meat or touching the carcass of an animal that disqualified the Israelites from this contact with Yahweh? All right. So are the animals inherently unclean? And I think you can answer that two ways. But I think the most important way to say that is no. Because all animals are creations of Yahweh. Right? There's nothing that is made that it was not made through his hands. And so, especially before the fall, there was no uncleanliness, right? There was nothing of impurity with any animal that was made. They were all clean. They were all good and right. They were all purified. They were all sanctified. So there's nothing inherently evil or inherently unclean in any of them. Yahweh didn't make the pig to be unclean. It's after the fall that comes into place. Okay? So, same with the shellfish, same with the camels, all of these sorts of things. So I think maybe the best way that we should probably look at this is that God has actually ordained for the Israelites two domains or two dominions of life. Right? He's ordered human life in these two spheres. Okay? So we've got the sphere or the domain of the common, which is your house and your home, your work and your play, the things that you do in the common everyday stuff of life. That's good. That's good stuff. But then that is certainly separated or set aside or delineated from the, for lack of a better term, the supernatural domain, right? The things of the divine, the things of the altar and the tabernacle and all of that. So the two are different, and God has actually ordered the Israelites' life around those. Okay? So in that way, then, the sanctuary and the home, they are connected. The Lord's table and the family's table, they are connected. What happens in the greater, and so which one's the greater? The Lord's table, right? Not the family's table, the Lord's table. The sanctuary, the house of the Lord, is greater than the family's house. And yet they're connected and they're still good. Both of them are still good. But in that way, then, the greater thing is the thing that actually governs the lesser thing. Right? So what happens in the greater is mirrored by the lesser. Staying with me there, hopefully? All right, so the Lord has already laid bare, we've seen this earlier in Leviticus, the Lord has actually already laid bare the appropriate sacrifices, the things that are good, right? The things that should be used for certain sacrifices. And he's already done this. He set this out. So the things that are to be used for sacrifices, and then remember, the majority of the sacrifices are actually consumed, if not by the Israelites who are gathered around, then by the priests themselves. There's a very small amount of each sacrifice that's actually laid aside and burnt up on the offering. And I think there's only a very, very small amount of full, complete sacrifices that are completely burnt up on the altar. Almost everything is actually consumed by the people. So Yahweh, in the sacrifice that's presented to him, is actually providing in a very temporal way to his people, to the priests, food for their body, for their nourishment, right? So the Lord's already laid out the stipulations for the appropriate sacrifices and how they're going to be used. So this automatically then gives the Israelites a clue about the appropriate food to place on their family table, right? If you never place a pig on the altar of the Lord, one should probably stop and wonder if you should place a pig on your family's table. That's an automatic thought that I'm pretty sure that was running through every Israelite's mind. And so the fact that this is actually laid out probably isn't that big of a difference, right? Once they heard that pigs are detestable in the sight of Yahweh for a number of different reasons, right? They root in their own filth. They're connected to the pagan religions. They're connected to the demonic Baal worship, right? A lot of the pagan religions in this area, they used pigs as part of their sacrifice. So they would sacrifice these animals. They would seek out these animals to be their sacrifice that they would give to their gods. So Yahweh's already said, no, pigs are not good to be on my altar. And if they're not on my altar, since we are connected, the altar of the Lord and the altar or that table of the Lord and the table in your home, and you are my people, and I cleanse you because they are connected, then they're not allowed on your table. All right, does that kind of make sense? There's a little bit of a connect here, right? That Yahweh isn't just running around arbitrarily just saying, grasshopper, yes, but mole rat, no. That's not what he's doing here. Now, I've got to be honest, completely honest. There's some things that I don't get, right? There's some things I don't know why the grasshopper is fine for them to eat, but every other type of bug, a centipede wasn't, or I don't know, a spider wasn't, or a scorpion wasn't, but the grasshoppers were. I don't know that delineation. Also, I gotta extend that to the ocean too. As far as the ocean as a whole, or lakes or streams as a whole, the Israelite people saw the ocean. And this carries into the Jews as well in the New Testament. We talked a little bit about this at the sermon last week with Jesus walking on the water. The things of the deep were seen as the things of the underworld. So the things under the ocean, the things under the water could easily be associated with that as well. So all of the swarming things, are the things that crawl on the bottom of the ocean. That's the crabs and the lobsters and all of that sort of stuff. Those things were detestable, right? And the only thing that you could eat was fins and scales. I don't know. I don't know why you can do that, but you can't eat a dolphin, right? I don't know how many of us would want to eat flipper, but nonetheless. So those are some tough ones. But then you go on into the animals too, and then you see the animals or the reptiles, the swarming things on the ground, right? These help a little bit more, or I think we can play this out and tease this out a little bit more. Because, again, a lot of these animals were tied to the pagan religions. So the pagan religions in that area, a lot of them, the reptiles, the snakes, the lizards, all of this sort of stuff, the things that crawl on their belly, everything, they were pictures of or types of, that's not the right word, it's not coming to me right now, but they used these animals in order to project certain types of their gods, right? So Moloch might look like this animal, or whomever might look like this animal. And so they were used as idols. That happened a lot with the birds too, especially not the birds that we would think of like chickens and turkeys and stuff like that. Really, who's going to take a chicken and say, yes, this is my God? But the other animals, the more majestic animals, the animals that were predators, right? The birds that were predators, birds of prey, or the birds that were scavengers, right, that would actually just eat nothing but carrion. They most of the time, or a lot of the times, they were seen in these pagan religions as types of or pictures of their gods, or they were seen as omens of good luck, right? So if you saw an eagle, that was an omen that something was going to happen, maybe something good. But if you saw a different type of animal, that was a bad thing, right? Owls were connected in that way. They're also of the night. They're of the evil things. Um, what else is in all of that? I don't know. I think maybe I've covered most of those. Um, but you would never take any of that, right? And you would never offer that on the altar of the Lord as a sacrifice. Well, if you're not going to offer that on the Lord's altar at the Lord's table as a sacrifice, uh, mostly because they're already connected to all of these pagan religions, then you're certainly not going to put it on your own table too. And putting it on your own table makes you unclean. And if it makes you unclean, then you actually can't go in that day. You have to wait till sundown, right? You have to be washed. You have to wash your clothes. You have to dip yourself in water. You have to be ceremonially clean in order to then go into the sanctuary to actually receive the good gifts of your Lord. So we can see how these are interconnected. The table of the Lord, the table of the people. We can see how those are interconnected. That's my wife. I'm going to have to call her right back because we've got 5 more minutes here. Okay. Let's see. Some of the other animals. I know I'm kind of going through this really quickly here, but I think we're covering most stuff. So. Are we gonna jump to fulfillment of Christ? I gotta blame Joy because now she got me all messed up here. One small little thing here. When I was reading out of the ESV. You might be reading out of the King James Version at home, or the New King James Version at home, or something like that. And you probably were like, "Oh, mine doesn't say this type of owl. It says a different type of owl." And that's fair because a lot of these Hebrew words. We know that it's a type of bird of prey, but we couldn't say exactly what species it was, right? And so it's kind of a guessing game. The translators are actually taking other texts and trying to figure out the best. And usually they're close. It's the same type of bird. We just don't know if it's a bald eagle or a golden eagle, right? That sort of stuff. So if there's any differences, that's kind of the reason why. All right, how is this fulfilled by Christ? We're going to jump to that section because I don't think we need to take the time to draw this out to 2 different weeks. I think you're kind of catching the gist of everything that I'm saying. If you don't, bring it up to me and we'll do it personally one-on-one. But how is this fulfilled by Christ? So already in the Old Testament, the prophets, a little bit before, so like Abraham, but also much afterwards, like David and Solomon and Ezekiel and Isaiah and all of this, the prophets promised a time in which Yahweh himself would cleanse his people and sanctify his people. And I know that's what's happening in the tabernacle. Yahweh is the one who's doing it. He's doing it through the hands of the priests. Well, there's going to be a time, the prophets proclaim, that Yahweh's going to do it, and he's not going to do it through the hands of the priests, and he's not going to do it through sacrifices of bulls and goats. He's going to do it himself. This all points forward to the incarnation. He's going to do it in the flesh. Yahweh is actually going to do this. He is going to sanctify and cleanse his people. In the flesh, this will happen. Okay. So that's this promise already in the Old Testament. And Christ, of course, fulfills that. He is our purification, right? Everything that he did on the cross, he won on the cross because he fulfilled all of that Old Testament. He fulfilled all of those Levitical laws. He did it all on the cross, and then he is that sacrifice, right? And he's that good sacrifice. What does John the Baptist call him? Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. That is one of the greatest things most important, I don't know, you catch my drift, things that can be sacrificed in the tabernacle, in the temple, right, is this lamb. Well, this is Yahweh, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. So he is the fullness of this sacrifice. Then he's sacrificed on the cross. And so then, and we've talked about this before, I'm not going to belabor the point, but then that is given to us, and that sacrifice, that purity is given to us through word, through the washing and baptism, right? And so you probably saw that or heard that a little bit in chapter 11. If you touch something that's dead, and we talked about that last week, why things that are dead are things of the underworld and things of the demons. That contrasts, that's a bad thing, which contrasts all the pagan religions. So, but if anything touches something that's dead, it must be dipped in water, right? If it's unclean, it must be dipped in water to be clean. Baptism, right? Foreshadowing baptism. And then, of course, that whole sacrificial stuff where you can't eat any of this stuff at your own family's table. Well, that's already speaking and connected to what you eat and consume from the Lord's table. Well, what do we eat and consume from the Lord's table? The sacrifice that was broken and poured out for us on the cross, Jesus himself, right? His body, his blood. So there's that fulfillment right there. When we go to the New Testament, we actually see Jesus criticizing the Pharisees because they're more concerned about their outward cleanliness. And we could see this as the common stuff. Then they're actually concerned about the cleanliness and the purity of their heart, right? So they're more concerned about, hey, I haven't defiled my outward body by touching a dead cat today, than receiving the actual gifts that are poured out at the tabernacle and at the temple. The real stuff, the real important stuff. And so we see this actually come into play in Matthew 23:24. It's really funny because Jesus, and I never realized, I've heard this saying before, but I never understood it until today's text in Leviticus. But Matthew chapter 23, verse 24, he's talking to the Pharisees, and he's talking the fact that they are more concerned with this outward stuff, right? So 23:24, he says, woe to you, I'm starting with 23:23, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, and then justice and mercy and faithfulness. These ought to have been done without neglecting the others. 24. You bind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel, right? So you take your little cup of water and you're so concerned. They literally did this. They were so concerned about consuming something that was unclean, like a gnat that might have floated into there or landed in their wine, right? They're so concerned with straining that out before they drink it that they don't understand that they've actually defiled themselves already by a number of other things. And Jesus just speaks of that in a metaphorical way of saying, you strain out a gnat, you literally do that, and you're consuming a camel. Now, they never consume a camel, but the things that they're doing is like consuming a camel. We heard earlier that camels are unclean, right? Camels make you unclean. So they have to remember, or they have to be reminded, or they're being told, and we have to remember that our holiness comes and our unity comes with Christ. God's the one who makes us holy. And so in Matthew chapter 15, this is the section right before what we're going to hear today, this week, in the gospel reading. So Jesus is having a conversation with the Pharisees, and his disciples are there, and he's having this conversation about what makes someone unclean or clean. And he gets to this point where it's not the things that go into the mouth that make you unclean, but the things that come out of the heart. Or actually the things that come out of the mouth, and the things that come out of the mouth come because you believe them in your heart. So if your heart is unclean, then the things out of your mouth is unclean, therefore you are unclean, right? Well, the way that for you to be clean and purified is for your heart to be rendered, right? So that your heart is cleansed. Well, the only one who can do that is Christ. There's no amount of eating the correct oxen and staying away from a turkey vulture that is going to make me actually clean, make my heart clean. It's only Christ who can do that. And the beautiful thing about that is that in Mark's account of that very same section, so that's going to be Mark chapter 7, he's talking to the Pharisees. Mark speaks about this. I don't think Matthew does, though. So Mark chapter 7, verse 19, we see that in this dialogue right here, that when Jesus is saying, the thing that comes out of your mouth, not the things that go into your mouth, is what makes you unclean, then Jesus is actually saying there's nothing unclean to eat. Right? I'll read that here, Mark chapter 7, verse 19. Where's it at? I'll start with 18. And he said to them, then are you also without understanding? Do you see that whatever goes into a person from outside cannot defile him, since it enters not his heart, but his stomach, and is expelled? Thus he declared all foods clean. Okay, so right there we've got this whole flipping of the Levitical stuff, right? Because Christ has come to cleanse the heart. If the heart is already cleansed, then the body is automatically cleansed. We don't have to cleanse the body in order to cleanse the heart, right? This was the whole thing of the Old Testament. Everything in the Old Testament was going to be fulfilled in Christ, and that's why it had to be done over and over and over and over and over again. And that's why it could never fully cleanse the heart. So you had to come with your body cleansed. If you defiled your body, you couldn't come into the holiness of God, right, in the Old Testament. Well, Christ has reversed that order. He's come and he's actually cleansed us from all unrighteousness and cleansed our heart. And now we don't have to worry about, oh, I ate a spider, right? I don't think anybody would ever actually eat a spider. But we don't have to worry about eating something and making us unclean, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing, because bacon's great, and so is lobster. And if I could just have a meal of bacon and lobster, I think I could die a happy man, right? And then finally, the last thing, and we see this even after the ascension, Jesus comes in this vision and makes known to Peter, who sometimes Peter, even after the ascension, kind of stumbles up a little bit, and that's fine because I do all the time. But Peter is given this vision of the sheet comes down and everything unclean is there, right? Shellfish and lizards and pig and all this stuff. And Yahweh says, eat. And he says, I can't. Nothing's ever come into my mouth that's unclean. And Jesus says, don't call anything I've ever created unclean. I created it, therefore it's clean. And not only did that speak to Peter of saying, oh, wow, I can eat bacon. Yay, I've heard it's so good. I want to try it. But he also, it shows him that Gentiles, and this is the whole thing of Acts chapter 10, is that Christ has not just come to cleanse the hearts of the Jews or the Israelites, but he's done it for the Gentiles too. He's done it for Cornelius, right? All right. Okay, we're a little bit over, a little bit long, 33 minutes, but I think we did good. That way we don't have to go over chapter 11 again. If there's any questions, let me know. Otherwise, the Lord be with you.